So, what do you know about communication? If I say communication, what comes up to your mind? Anything, guys. There is not any wrong answer today. So, if I say communication, what comes up to your mind? Don't be shy.
Talk.
To talk. Perfect. What else?
Messages.
Okay. Someone else?
Exchange of information.
Sorry? Sorry, I couldn't hear you. Okay, someone else? Okay, you're shy, but you won't be shy after this lesson, I'm sure. Okay, so someone says talk, someone said message. Let's start with this video. One second. Okay.
Have you ever talked?
Can you hear the audio now? Yeah. Okay.
Have you ever talked with a friend about a problem only to realize that he just doesn't seem to grasp why the issue is so important to you? Have you ever presented an idea to a group and it's met with utter confusion? Or maybe you've been in an argument when the other person suddenly accuses you of not listening to what they're saying at all. What's going on here? The answer is miscommunication, and in some form or another, we've all experienced it. It can lead to confusion, animosity, misunderstanding, or even crashing a multi-million-dollar probe into the surface of Mars. The fact is, even when face-to-face with another person, in the very same room, and speaking the same language, human communication is incredibly complex. But the good news is that a basic understanding of what happens when we communicate can help us prevent miscommunication. For decades, researchers have asked, what happens when we communicate? One interpretation, called the transmission model, views communication as a message that moves directly from one person to another, similar to someone tossing a ball and walking away. But in reality, this simplistic model doesn't account for communication's complexity. Enter the transactional model, which acknowledges the many added challenges of communicating. With this model, it's more accurate to think of communication between people as a game of catch. As we communicate our message, we receive feedback from the other party. Through the transaction, we create meaning together. But from this exchange, further complications arise. It's not like the Star Trek universe, where some characters can Vulcan mind meld, fully sharing thoughts and feelings. As humans, we can't help but send and receive messages through our own subjective lenses. When communicating, one person expresses her interpretation of a message, and the person she's communicating with hears his own interpretation of that message. Our perceptual filters continually shift meanings and interpretations. Remember that game of catch? Imagine it with a lump of clay. As each person touches it, they shape it to fit their own unique perceptions based on any number of variables, like knowledge or past experience, age, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, or family background. Simultaneously, every person interprets the message they receive based on their relationship with the other person and their unique understanding of the semantics and connotations of the exact words being used. They could also be distracted by other stimuli, such as traffic or a growling stomach. Even emotion might cloud their understanding. And by adding more people into a conversation, each with their own subjectivities, the complexity of communication grows exponentially. So as the lump of clay goes back and forth from one person to another, reworked, reshaped, and always changing, it's no wonder our messages sometimes turn into a mush of miscommunication. But luckily, there are some simple practices that can help us all navigate our daily interactions for better communication. 1. Recognize that passive hearing and active listening are not the same. Engage actively with the verbal and nonverbal feedback of others and adjust your message to facilitate greater understanding. 2. Listen with your eyes and ears, as well as with your gut. Remember that communication is more than just words. 3. Take time to understand as you try to be understood. In the rush to express ourselves, it's easy to forget that communication is a two-way street. Be open to what the other person might say. And finally, 4. Be aware of your personal perceptual filters. Elements of your experience, including your culture, community, and family, influence how you see the world. Say, this is how I see the problem, but how do you see it? Don't assume that your perception is the objective truth. That'll help you work towards sharing a dialogue with others to reach a common understanding together.
Okay. So, hope you liked the video. As we saw, communication is a process, okay? And being a process, we have several elements in this process, which are all very important. The first element is the sender. The sender is the person who sends the message. In this case, I am the sender of this workshop, of this presentation. Okay, so the person who sends the message is called the sender. What do I send? I send a message, a content, which in this case is this presentation. What is the message about? Okay, the message in this case is about communication. And this is another element of the process. Then we have the channel. It could be verbal, non-verbal. It could be like we are doing now on Teams, so virtually. But also the message depends on how it is sent. Okay, it could be downward. So, for example, as an employer to his employee, as an employer to an employee, it could be horizontal, peer-to-peer, teacher to teachers, or classmate to classmate, or it can be upward. For example, child to parent, teacher to student to teacher, or employee to employer. Also, there are different kind of channel in a message. It could be, for example, in this case, I said it's Microsoft Teams. It could be the voice. It could be written if the message is written. Think about advertising, for example. Advertising, the channel is the TV or the press. So there are different kind of channels. Then we have the most important, one of the most important element in a communication process, which is the context. Okay. Sometimes when we communicate, we don't think about it. because it's transparent. It's not something that we see. Okay, something that we can touch the context, but it's very important. The context is what surrounds us. In the video, you saw the example of the crash between two cars. Okay, when you are in the traffic, you are angry, you are very angry, and your emotions can give a message which is not the real message you want to say. Okay, so the context is very important. The context is important also in the environment you are. If you are at school, you don't talk like you are at home. If you talk to a teacher, if you talk to your classmates, if you're at school or if you're at home, the message is different, the register is different. What you say, the use of vocabulary, the use of words you use is very different. So the context is very important. And then we got the receiver. The receiver is the one who receives the message. The receiver can be a person, can be an audience, can be known or also unknown. Again, think about advertising. Advertising, who is the receiver? The receiver are the people who are watching the TV show. The sender doesn't know the receivers, okay, but they are there. So receiver is another important element of the communication process. Okay. These 5 elements create this process. In the traditional definition of communication, we have an unilateral way to communicate. So in a context, with the use of channel, we have the message that goes from the sender to the receiver. Okay. But in reality, new studies are demonstrating that the real communication is not unilateral, but it's bilateral. Okay, because sender and receiver, in this case source and perceiver, they continue to interact. There is a continued interaction between them. Try to think, you need to communicate something to one of your friends. You need to ask your friend out, okay? You don't simply, well, you can ask, hi, what do you do next Saturday? Are we going to have a pizza together? Okay, this could be a good message. This could be a sender to receiver, but think about if the receiver is not listening to you. If the receiver is looking at the phone, is the receiver talking to someone else? Okay, you modify your interaction. You change somehow the way in which you're giving the message. So the interaction is, the communication is bilateral because you see the behavior of the receiver, of the perceiver, and you change your attitude, you change your way of communicating in order to fulfill the goal. In this case, I want to go out with you next Saturday. Okay,